Good morning.
All right.
Well, I tell you, I'm pretty excited about the group that's gathered here today, the reach of this group, the power and resources in this group, the vision in this group, all focused on mobility and transportation. You know, for a city where so much is going so right and so much is in the city, mobility is Austin's Achilles heel. If we don't have a bold and big vision for what we're going to do with our region's mobility over the next 25 years, 50 years, if we don't take big and bold action, we're going to lose what keeps Austin and this region special. You know, transportation, as we all know, is about congestion. I know that I get approached about congestion every time I go to the grocery store, and I know my colleagues on the council as well. But it's about more than congestion. It's also about public health in our region. It's about affordability in our region. It's about safety and equity in our region. You know, the future is going to require bold action, partnerships, and public engagement in order for us to meet this challenge. So today, we're going to have laid out before us as a community a place to start a conversation, a beginning place, finally, to have a serious conversation about a big and bold regional mobility plan. I want to thank everybody for being here because this conversation is critical to us. This is a big day for Austin. It's a big day for Central Texas. And this is the first big day of other days to come as we begin today an 18-month conversation about big ideas. By the end of today, the public and community are going to know that we are engaged in a big conversation about a big vision about the future of transportation for our region. Austin's region continues to grow. We all know that. In fact, Austin, as we know, is the fastest growing large metropolitan region in the country this year, and the year before, 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 and the year before. 7 years running. And with that growth comes real opportunity, but also comes real significant challenges. And the one that we're talking about today is traffic congestion. So our population is expected to double in the region, going up to 4 million people sometime in the 2040s. And during that same period, due to limited space, our road capacity is only projected to go up about 15%. But despite what we hear every day, congestion is not the only challenge that we have. Affordability is a transportation challenge. You know, transportation costs are usually, in most homes, the second largest line item that they pay. Costs more than health care, costs more than child care, costs more than food, and it even costs more than property taxes in the region. If we don't make transportation more affordable and more accessible to more people, then our city will never be more affordable. Transportation is about safety. Now, Austin is fortunate to be one of the safest big cities in the country, but we are losing far too many of our neighbors on our roads. We average in the last couple of years about 4 or 5 years, about 75 people dying in motor vehicle accidents, many others injured. If we had that number, if we had 75 people being killed each year by a curable illness, we would call it a public health crisis. We would deploy resources and vaccines or interventions to address the spread, and we would bring the death toll down to what is the only acceptable number in that situation, which is 0. Yet every year we lose that number of people killed in preventable accidents, traffic collisions in our city. Transportation is a public health issue. We have too many people in Austin who live in neighborhoods without access to jobs or education or health care or healthy foods, with insufficient transportation choices to get them the things that they need. Transportation is an equity issue as well, so it is not just about traffic and congestion, it's about our quality of life and affordability and equity and opportunity. Again, I'll say, for a city where so much is going right, mobility is Austin's Achilles heel. If we don't have a bold vision and take bold action of a size and scale equal to that challenge, we will lose what makes Austin special. So we have to all come together, find new solutions, embrace game-changing technology, make tough decisions, and change in a way that reflects the best for Austin. The city and our partners, I think all represented in this room, have been working hard to address transportation challenges. Organizations have stepped up real dramatically in recent years. The RMA, TxDOT, counties in the region, cities in the region. In 2016, the city of Austin passed a $720 million mobility bond. If you drive, if you take transit, if you walk, if you bike, we're making major investments for you. We learned as a city that if we actually put up a $50 million match like we did on Loop 360, the state will respond by bringing another $200 million to the table. And now we're going to take traffic lights off Loop 360. Almost $500 million on our major corridors like North Lamar and Burnett and Riverside and East MLK and Slaughter and William Cannon. With this corridor work, you're going to see substantial reductions in crashes and improvements to safety. We're talking about increasing throughput by 20-25% and diminishing accidents by about 15%. It's going to reduce delay for drivers and buses. We're investing in more than 120 traffic signals with transit priority capabilities. We've already transformed several of Austin's high crash intersections to make them safer, and there are 20 right now being changed to make them safer as well. These safety projects at intersections have resulted in a 45% decrease in crashes. With that bond, we've already planted 21 more miles of sidewalks in the city, safe routes to schools and transit stops and parks. I mention all that because I want everyone to leave here in the community to know that bonds work. Bonds work. I mention that because there's a bond election coming up in November. Has a transportation component. And because we have to think about bonds in the future in order to be able to perhaps help deliver regional answers. And then as you hear from Jim Smith shortly, it's hard now to introduce Jim Smith without prefacing it by saying our own National Airport Director of the Year. Making huge strides with the airport. Austin Bergstrom about to be the envy of the industry. We're adding more gates right now. Recent analysis showed that the airport provides us with over $7 billion of economic activity. As evidence of the tremendous airport, Jim told me that I'm allowed to tell you a secret that's not really being announced until Wednesday. But I guess since he said I could say it out loud, I'm get the chance to jump the gun a little bit. There is yet another major international carrier that's going to begin service to Austin's airport. So we all have to get ready to be able to say Guten Tag to Lufthansa coming here to the airport. He also whispered to me that there will be yet another carrier announcement, but that's all that he whispered, so I don't know either. But I'm anxious. But even with that, we still have untapped potential. We just laid out a plan for 20 years of growth, doubling the number of gates that we have at the airport. And speaking of plans for the future, the City of Austin is soon going to unveil its proposal, a new strategic mobility plan that's been coordinated with the 2016 bond work, coordinated with Project Connect and what's going to be discussed here today. But as much as progress is being made across the board on transportation right now, it is not enough. That's why we need a bold and new and big vision for regional high-capacity transit. And it has to be followed with bold action. On the same night that we passed our $720 million 2016 bond, and felt really good because it was so much larger than anything that we had ever done at $720 million, on the same day that we were voting for that, the voters in and around Seattle went to the polls and approved a $56 billion regional transportation plan. On the same day that we were celebrating a $720 million success at the polls, Phoenix voters in that region were approving a $26 billion regional transportation plan. Those are the cities that we compete with. We need to go even bigger. We need to make our bold vision real. And that means we're going to have some difficult conversations. But one thing we have heard loud and clear: if we're serious about delivering transit that works, no matter that conversation, no matter how this shakes out, we need dedicated pathways in this city. For me, that's the takeaway today. And I think you'll hear that as you go through and see if it's not the takeaway that you leave with too. I don't know how we're going to pay for whatever it is that we do, but I would suggest that that's not the conversation we should be having now. We should first decide what we want, and once we know what we want, then we can figure out how to pay for it. I don't know the right mode for us to use, but I would suggest that regardless of what mode we use, we need dedicated pathways in this city. I went to Dublin with Diane a couple years ago, and we spent the day in the traffic control center in the city of Dublin. That's because I know how to show a girl a good time. But while we were there, we looked not only at what was happening on Dublin streets, but we looked at pictures of Dublin just 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I was looking at pictures of streets in Dublin that looked as congested as South Lamar and North Lamar and Burnett Road at their worst. And then I looked at those same roads on the TV screens that were being monitored, and it was like night and day. They had an intersection in that street that had really 6 really busy roads that all converged on the same spot. If you can imagine what that looks like in rush hour traffic. And now, today, there's free flow traffic to that intersection on transit only. And I looked at that and I asked the city council people and the mayor that were taking me around, I said, how did you go from that to this? And they said it took political will, it took a united community, and it took people that were willing to make hard choices, and it took, frankly, elected politicians that put at risk their offices to be able to initiate and push that conversation. I think that we need a big and bold conversation in our region as well. We're ready to have those difficult conversations. We are ready to take the bold action if we do it together and with our bold vision in mind. We need a vision and a plan the size of the challenge that we face. That's what today's about. And dedicated pathways. Thank you.